This is the Debunking Economics Podcast with Steve Keen and Phil Dobbie.
The Archives.
Episode 212, Levelling Up. Can Boris really bridge regional diversity?
Well, Boris Johnson has talked about levelling up the UK economy, bringing the wealth of the more deprived areas so they're closer to the wealth of the more affluent areas, without the affluent folks having to pay for it or to lose out. Is that even possible? And what policies along those lines would work? Or was it just a handy slogan to win an election? A rhetorical question, perhaps, that one. I suspect we all know the answer. But the broader question of how you fix regional diversity remains. And we'll look at that today on the Debunking Economics Podcast with Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie. Welcome along. Now, I'm not sure how many times he said it, but it's a lot. I'm talking about Boris Johnson uniting Great Britain and levelling up the economy, as he likes to call it. It helped him win an election, of course. He won 47 new seats. Labour lost 59 of them in the election last year. In the northeast of England, a Labour heartland decimated by the Thatcher government, thanks to the collapse of the iron and steel industry, the Tories took seats like Darlington, Stockton South and Bishop Auckland. These are staunchly Labour seats that have swung around. Redcar's another one, had a swing of more than 15% to the Tories. Presumably, now a big chunk of it will have been because he promised to get Brexit done without dither or delay. But it was also this levelling up argument, Steve, that you can benefit the North without compromising the South. Everyone can have growth, but to even things out, then obviously the North will grow that much faster. Is that a realistic proposition? Can you sort of like have a two-speed economy where the disadvantaged part of the economy is actually growing faster than the part of the economy that's doing all right?
Well, it depends on what the motive force is, because there are, the first thing to get down pat is that any dynamic process, any evolutionary process ends up having what Blair Fix and others would describe very well as a power law distribution, and that is that if you in mathematical terms, they call it a power law. And the way they illustrate is, let's take whatever factor is causing something you put on the x-axis, whatever is the result you put on the y-axis. And if you use logs on both, say the scale goes 1, 10, 100, 1,000, rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you do that, what you see is a straight line, and that sort of thing turns up in an enormous number of processes. So, like the size of snowflakes and raindrops, the size of earthquakes. If you put the number of earthquakes on the x-axis and the force of the earthquakes on the vertical, it doesn't really matter which one goes where, but they have the log of the number, so 1, 10, 100, 1,000 for the number of earthquakes, and the Richter scale actually is a logarithmic scale itself. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the Richter scale on the vertical, you'll see a straight line. So there's thousands and thousands of more small earthquakes than there are big earthquakes, but the plot of the relationship is a straight line. And when you apply that to income distribution or wealth distribution, you get the same thing. So what you will get is there will be some highly concentrated place, like, for example, London, which has got many more people and much higher incomes than some other place, like, for example, Newcastle. So that's your first factor. And if you want to break that, if you want to get more than one region of dominance in a society, then you either need to have serious divisions into that society via states. And of course, that's what happens in America. You have the 50 states of America. So within each, the state capital itself will be bigger than any of the regional centres. But there's some sort of local distribution network that gives you a local effect, that gives you a broken down power law at the state level as well as the national power law. With the UK,
we've got county councils, haven't we? And we did try, what are ccalled growth polls. That's the economic geographer's term for it. Where you get an agglomeration of industries in or near the growth pole, which is what you're talking about with London. Yeah. But it could just as easily be saying, well, okay, let's do it for the northeast of England. Let's have Newcastle. as a growth pole, and the benefit of that is going to spread out over the surrounding region. And they sort of tried that in the 80s because they put a lot of money into Newcastle. They built the 50-mile long metro system to try and help get people into the centre of Newcastle, so that the local retail industry could build up. The problem with that was it decimated Teesside, which was 25 miles to the south, because everyone moved out of Teesside to go up to Newcastle because that's where the money was. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? If you're doing it because the geography of the UK is so small, you put money into one town, in effect you get towns playing off against each other.
Yeah, and that's one of the dilemmas. If in doing it, if you're going to solve, the balance of London versus the rest of the country, so you put up one other site locally, then you might you may end up being lucky and causing something which causes that particular region to grow, but the regions around it will shrink. So it's very hard to avoid the agglomeration effect in a capitalist economy, because again, what grows isn't just the original industry gives you a growth spurt. One of my old colleagues, Doug Noland, who was one of the original bears about the stock market back in before the 2000 crash, Doug used to talk about the sushi effect. And that is that if you have something like, for example, Silicon Valley evolving, so suddenly there's a region which is not New York and it's not Los Angeles and it's not quite San Francisco. So it's a region outside the current growth centers. When it starts to grow, then it grows, of course, because of the computer industry. So you have all these software developers everywhere. But bang, the sushi industry benefits. So it spreads over into other industries in the local area, and that can give you a growth pole for a while. But overwhelmingly, the pressure is that the bigger the city, to some until it starts to be totally dysfunctional, the bigger the city, the more likely that city is to attract all the action. And in London, how large is London compared to the next largest city in the UK?
Now you're asking me. Much. The answer to that question is, Steve, much bigger. I don't know the absolute.
It's got to be the figures,
but
it's got to be the order of 10 times, hasn't it?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe not quite that much, but certainly, Birmingham is the next biggest, and it is a lot smaller. But then, beyond Birmingham and Manchester, then you are getting into much smaller towns and cities, and that is the problem, of course, because those towns and cities also have large. It's quite a decentralized population in the UK, isn't it? Because people aren't living in. Whereas in Australia, everyone lives in an urban centre by and large. There's very few people live in small towns, whereas lots of people live in small towns and villages in the UK, and they work in they commute to towns. So that's if they've got a job. So that's the issue, isn't it? You can't have those big conurbations that are going to be acting as growth poles, because there's just too many towns and cities. And if you let one grow, you're going to disadvantage all the others. So it is a quandary. So this is why in the 60s and 70s they had more of a carrot and stick approach in the UK. Because if you can't just let it all level up, as Boris wants to do, then the only other way is to take that carrot and stick approach. So, we move here and we'll give you some sort of tax advantage. Don't move. If you want to build a factory here, we're not going to let you, or we're going to make it more expensive. So you used to have an industrial development certificate, which basically made it harder to establish a factory, because we used to have those in the UK in the olden days.
Factories, wow.
Factories, I know. That shows how out of date this policy is now. But if you wanted to establish a factory over a certain area in the south of England, you had to have a bloody good reason. And 1 in 4 applications in what were called non-problem areas were refused. But that is levelling down, isn't it? That's not levelling up. That's levelling down. That's taking away from the wealthy part of the country, hopefully to the advantage of the less wealthy. But there's also the danger that some of those companies may go, well, if we can't be in the southeast, we're going to go to France. Thanks.
Yeah, you've got to make it advantageous to not go into the capital city itself, but to not leave the country at the same time, which is rather a difficult balancing act. And having seen the UK's incredible management of the COVID crisis, I wouldn't have
ability to manage its way out of anything.
It's looking pretty dire. So you do need to have that discouragement there, because one of the nicest little elements of non-orthodox economics was a geographic idea. You've probably learnt your economic geography, the Hertelling's theory of location. Was that something in economic geography?
We've spoken about it on the podcast.
Yeah,
at least twice. This is what the idea of if you're setting up an ice cream stand on a beach, then two people are going to put it right in the center, right next to each other, because they'll get the share of the entire beach. Whereas if you've got a third one, then they'll start to separate out and try and claim more of a geographic monopoly. But I'm not sure. Again, it's the UK is the beach, isn't it? Everyone wants to be in the middle because it's not big enough to spread out.
Yeah, but we've got to put a bit of a qualification on that argument as well, because if you do get those sort of agglomerations happening, and this is what we see industrially around the world, industries do start in localized agglomerations. And one of the results of that is you do get innovation. So when you talk about the hoteling example and the ice cream, the idea is, well, if you could force them to be 1/3 and 2/3 location on the beach, then you make it easier to walk together to get ice cream. We're talking in a very generic way about ice cream. And I don't know about you, but I'm a bit picky about ice cream. If you're talking the sort of low grade Peters stuff, pardon me, anybody who owns Peters being part of the podcast, then forget it. If you're talking the Bill and Jerry style ice cream, then you've got me as a customer. And if you are close to each other, then you can't compete on locality anymore. You've got to compete on diversity. And you then, even though you might find it's harder to walk to that central location, you may get more innovation coming out of it. So one of my favorite examples of this is actually the Italian car industry. And of course, if you talk about what country produces fast cars, until Tesla came along, the answer was it's Italy. And the answer, why did Italy produce the fast cars? What's the history of the fast cars? Well, it ends up being the Lamborghini and the Ferrari families, both of whom, I believe, began as tractor manufacturers. And they're in the one small region of Italy, one company starts making an automobile, and of course they're selling to the high end buyers. They're trying to produce a performance car, and then I don't know which one was first, Lamborghini or Ferrari, but then Ferrari responds by having yet more features, yet more power, and so on, and you started getting this dramatic production of high performance cars all in the one region. And that regional cluster is what's given you the part of Italy which is, at least as prosperous as the best parts of Germany, and at least as capable in industrial development as well. So.
And thank God they did, because tractor racing would just not be anywhere near.
Oh, mate, you should have sseen the one advantage of being in Thailand is you see some pretty crazy stuff on the TV. The tuk-tuks.
They have tuk-tuk races, do they?
Well, it wasn't. I don't think it's in Thailand, because Thailand would ban this stuff. It's so damn dangerous. But it was cross-country tuk-tuk racing with people hanging out the edge of the tuk-tuks to balance them as they went around corners. I think it's somewhere in India.
Sounds like Indonesia. Oh, India.
Well, it could be Indonesia as well. Mate, honestly. And the tuk-tuks would fall over in mud puddles and have to be picked up and pushed out of the puddle by the crew. And then on they'd go. People in bare feet. I mean, my God.
So it sounds like you're saying then, that you've got to have this grouping of industries within close proximity.
To some extent, the concentration
they feed off each other. So does that mean then, for example, if you're looking at trying to grow the UK economy but also spread the wealth, I mean, maybe you do need to almost accept that the Southeast is going to be a good part of it, but you need to ease communication. We're a small country, so if you just have fast rail links, if you say, let's spend the money on the HS2, that means somebody in the north could be dealing with a company in the south, and the geography you're condensing the geography, which is already quite small, but you're just cutting down the journey times to enable those companies to feed off each other. Maybe that's part of the rationale.
Or you have to have something which means that a particular region takes off in the way that the car industry did in Italy early on, and then you've got a growth centre which is not Rome. But these
that hasn't happened though. I mean,
well, it's also what you mentioned in terms of government policy in the UK. It trashed what used to be a growth centre. I mean, you did have all those industries, and Newcastle was famous for something. I think it was called iron at one stage, and that was all trashed by government policy. And now you're trying. Well, the consequences of that is now a massively depressed region. It's easy to destroy. It's very hard to create those sorts of things.
So what about the idea of free ports? That's another one of Boris's ideas, although I noticed he's actually gone quite quiet on it. Well, he's gone quiet on everything, of course, because COVID-19 is such a disaster. He's trying to keep out the public spotlight. But he was talking about free ports, and maybe he's also being quiet because he's waiting till after the Brexit negotiations are finished, because he knows that if the UK was to introduce free ports, that would really piss off the rest of Europe, even though they already exist in Cyprus, Croatia, Bulgaria, Denmark, Estonia, France, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovenia, Spain, and yes, even Germany. But the UK shouldn't have them, apparently. But we don't have them currently. So this idea of free ports could actually be a good way. So you have depressed ports like Teesside, for example, that perhaps could find themselves offering whatever it might be. Let's look at in Germany, Bremerhaven or Haven is one of their free ports. They've got cargo companies. They do ship repairs like they used to do in Teesside, oil storage, car companies. They get foreign investment coming in. This might help with Boris's levelling up plans, maybe, if he pushed ahead with that.
Actually, the free ports was something which actually began in Southeast Asia as a way of bringing about export-oriented industrialisation. And the idea was you'd have a region of the country that was not subject to its labour laws in particular, and also not subject to import and export rules, and with low-cost capital, low-cost land for the firms to come in. I wonder what on earth is the attraction to have a free port in the actual destination countries rather than the developing countries. What's going on here? Because with tariffs being as low as they are, and import and export costs being drastically lower than they were 30 years ago, I just don't see what the advantages of those regions.
No, that's a good point. Where's he taking the goods from? What value is he adding, and where's he shipping them to? And also,
let's not leave the environment out of this one. The last thing we need is more shipping and more globalized long-term supply chains. The one thing COVID has done is show the dangers of having extensive supply chains. I now am hearing of companies. This is stories coming out of Australia, of course. Not of course, but it's a local context there. People who are selling off the last of their car stocks because when they stop, there are no more cars to sell because the supply chain has been broken to China. China itself has recovered, of course, from the virus, but their own supply chains don't work. Nobody's exporting from America right now, so suddenly they're going to be the sales will cease because and there's no local factory to make up for the fact you can't bring the parts in from overseas anymore. Right. So let's just trash that particular idea in the current global circumstances.
Yeah, so demand might be there, but the supply isn't. So what do you do then? How does Boris level up? Does he just pump more money into the regions? I can see problems with that because how do you make sure if you are pumping money in, it's going to the right place? And I'll give you an example on that. My mum lives in Northwich in Cheshire. They've got a shopping centre, I might have talked about this before, called Barron's Quay. Cost £80 million to build. It was expected it was going to make £4 million in rent from retailers, but it's making only half that, and the local council is having to pick up the rest of the bill to pay back the developer. So ratepayers are subsidising a failure of planning. So if levelling up means easier loans for regions, we could see a lot more of that sort of thing happening, couldn't we?
Yeah, well, this is one reason I'm a fan of the idea of a universal basic income rather than on its own a job guarantee. I support both because one thing with the UBI is you can give people a cash flow. It means they can actually try some local innovations, or try to innovate rather than living in an area which is completely depressed. So perhaps the best way to improve these regions is to bring in not the sort of slave level payments that some countries have used UBI as a way of, it's not just simplifying their welfare system, but actually reducing the amount they pay people. I know that's been part of the way it's been used. But a UBI that means you have a living income, even if you are in an area where there is not enough full-time jobs, and it means you can actually take a risk yourself.
Right. So in this case, I think the philosophy it was like a build it and they'll come mentality, wasn't it? Let's spend money on infrastructure, whatever it is, and that's going to create jobs and create wealth. What you're saying is no. Make sure people have more money, and then they will create the wealth.
You've got to create the aggregate demand first. I mean, this is one thing which is
it's a whole supply and demand argument, isn't it?
Yeah,
which
but it's
so often got
reversing
wrong.
Yeah,
Which comes first?
Yeah, it's the usual neoclassical way of thinking, which comes from Jean-Baptiste Say, the idea that supply creates its own demand. Now, the reality is that demand creates its own supply. If you have the aggregate demand, the supply can be generated to fill it. But if you focus on the supply side without the demand, you'll build white elephants like that one near your mother.
So here's the thing. Even before you start talking about universal basic income, look at public sector jobs. Almost a third of them are in the NHS. If their wages went up, that would make a difference. And of course, by its very nature, health services are all over the country. 28% of public sector jobs are in education. And then you've got the police on top of that as well. Again, all geographically dispersed. Push their wages up. That would go a long way to regionally spreading this levelling up that Boris is looking for, and would create that extra money in the economy to feed ancillary services.
And the same thing applies with the universities, the regional universities. They're not made to be profit centres with this crazy idea of £9,000 per student fees that the Tories brought in when they promised not to raise fees from 3,000 and they trebled them to 9. That means that the cost is imposed on the students, and the students don't spend or got to borrow money and go into debt to do it, etc., etc. Use it as one way of government money creation. That means that the public gets to spend the money the government creates, and you can get regional universities which themselves become growth centres.
Yeah, well, so those, I mean, are there cases where universities become experts in a particular field, and then that does rub off on the local geography and helps establish industries in a particular sector?
Well, I mean, this is a wrap for my older university, Kingston, which was, I won't go into detail about the management there or the facilities, but sorry,
you left it. They were great managers. That's what you meant to say, isn't it?
That's right. The great managers.
We won't go there.
But they did have a damn good robotics centre. And that then you get spin-offs coming out of that. Some students working on a particular project can then decide they're going to start a business in that area, and you then get you really can't pick where these things are. You've got to seed them and see what happens. And for that particular university, providing the funds rather than trying to rip the funds out of the students, giving the funds to the students, you could have had businesses being seeded by that in the area of robotics at that particular university.
So that seems like a sensible first step, then, doesn't it? It's a government has control of the public sector. Just pay more and try and push out more as well. So the UK public sector is 16.5% of all people employed in the UK. It's the lowest proportion actually since records began measuring this sort of thing, which was only back in 1999. There's also been a move to central government. So from September 2000 to March 2018, central government jobs rose from 2.3 million people to 3.1 million people. Local government jobs fell from 2.7 million down to 2 million. So there's been this centralisation of the public sector. So if Boris is serious about all of this, even though, of course, the demand for services by its very nature is all over the country. If Boris is serious about this, then he would be decentralising the public sector, and that would, even without universal basic income, if you raise the minimum wage as well, that would go a long way to his levelling up aims, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and this is actually the reverse of what the Tories brought in, which of course was austerity. And the main way they imposed austerity was that they had control over the funding of local governments, and they simply cut off the funding. So rather than them having to wear the opprobrium of deciding who gets to be cut, they forced it on local governments, and that is actually, decimated is a bad word, because decimated only means kill 10%. This is killing 30 and 40%, and so their own policies have caused the concentration they now say they're trying to reverse. So reverse the bloody policies, fund the local councils properly, reverse austerity. I'll hold my breath over that when for Johnson doing it, not.
Well, look at Canberra's an interesting example, isn't it? In that it's not Sydney and it's not Melbourne. They couldn't agree. I think that's the story, isn't it? They couldn't agree, so they said, well, let's stick it somewhere in the middle. It is in the middle of nowhere, of course, but you've got 400,000 people. It's a $40 or $50 billion Aussie dollar economy. In January had an unemployment ratio of 68.5 against a national average of 62.
You mean employment ratio? Employment ratio.
Employment ratio. Yeah. That's right. Well, maybe after COVID-19. Sorry, did I say unemployment ratio? Employment ratio 68.5. National average is 62. So there's the answer for Boris. He just needs to move the government to somewhere that's not London. Maybe Stockton-on-Tees, for example. Just move it up there and the problem solved.
I'd rather see them fund local councils properly and allow it to happen in that sense. Again, let's not forget that one of the major reasons why London is such a massive focus of wealth in the UK, it's the finance sector. And Maggie Thatcher's, again, this comes back to my favourite story, as you know, the level of private debt went from 55% of GDP when Maggie began this process in 79 to 82 to 194%. At the peak of the bubble, and down it went again. That is what really caused the growth of the UK financial sector, and that entirely occurs in not just in London but in the city of London. So if you want to diversify wealth and income creation throughout the UK, you cut down the size of the bloody city, because that's gone well beyond the power law. That's become the financial law, and that concentration is the main thing they need to reverse. They reverse that, then you might get to a far more equitable UK than you've got right now.
Right, but equitable is not the word, is it? He's talking specifically about levelling up, and the reason why he's saying levelling up is he wants to win everyone's vote, because levelling up means that if you are in London, you're going to be no worse off. In fact, I
heard actually Boris was in favour of people. I heard that Boris was actually in favour of people giving the clap to bankers.
What? As an infection?
I know I'm too old for that joke to get through to most of the audience, but I would love to give bankers the clap. I think they deserve the clap. But the whole idea, clapping for bloody bankers, honestly.
You're serious?
Huh?
Did he say that? He say that?
He wanted people who, rather than just clapping for the NHS, he wanted to clap for bankers. Yes, didn't you hear that one?
I can't. No, I can't.
I know bankers. I know a lot of bankers have been trying very hard to get the clap, and But honestly, it's
incredible. Anyway,
it's incredible.
So look, I mean, you're not. So here's the interesting thing: if we were to say, well, okay, what are we trying to level up? We're trying really it's wages and employment, isn't it? Really, I mean, in an ideal world, wherever you went in the country, people would be on a similar wage, or relative to the cost of living in the part of the country they're in, and that it's interesting. Maybe it's close to that. Who knows? But you'd also want to make sure that you've got an employment rate that's the same as well. But the UK is actually levelling down. It has sort of achieved more equality, because the real median earnings, the percentage change from 2008 to 2019. Adjusted for inflation, so these are the real numbers, people in London saw their wages fall 6% from 2008 to 2019. In the northeast, that depressed area, they only fell 1%. So Boris might actually find it easier to level down, seeming as that's what's happening anyway.
Well, they have to level down, because, I think I told you my really intriguing experiences when I first arrived in the UK was having dinner with a colleague, a Twitter colleague in the finance sector, his wife coming along, and I had not met his wife before. I asked her what she did for a living, and she said, I'm a school teacher, but she said, but I used to work in the finance sector. And he then explained that she earned more than he did when the reason they got married, and she told me that she left because she wanted to get a less stressful job, at which point I burst out laughing, having been a school teacher. And she said, yes, you're right, it's just as stressful, but at least I think I'm doing something worthwhile. But she said, when I got my first paycheck, the amount that I got paid in my first paycheck as a school teacher, not including, compared to what I got as in finance, not including my bonus, was 1/30th the salary I got as in the finance sector. Now, that means that school teachers get something ludicrous like £25,000 per year. So her salary, not including a bonus, in the finance sector was £750,000 a year. And she would have doubled that with a bonus. Now, that is the level of ludicrous concentration of wealth and income that the finance sector has got. And it's parasitic income. It's not sort of creative. I think most people listening to this podcast would agree with that, even if they work in the finance sector. So that's where the massive inequality has come from, and you have to level that down.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that would push the price of goods beyond everybody else, I guess, wouldn't it? I mean, although it's not going to push the price of beans up, but it's going to push the price of houses up, for example.
That's where ludicrous prices come from in the UK, particularly in London. The house prices are mad because mad people are being paid mad salaries and can afford to buy them, and the rest of you can go commute.
So what should be his measure then for levelling up? Maybe levelling down at the top, slicing the top off, and then levelling up the rest of us. What would be his measure of success? Is it unemployment rates, ensuring that we've got roughly similar unemployment rates around the country? If that's the case, then he's got a long way to go, because mid last year the unemployment rate in southeast England was 2.8%. In the northeast it was 5.6%. But of course they've voted for him now, so they'll be expecting it to race down to 2.8% to join their friends in the southeast.
No, I think the unemployment is one factor, but increasing minimum wages is a major one. I can't believe people are living on £7 an hour type pay rates, given the costs in the UK. Get rid of the bedroom tax and nonsense like that. Fund councils properly, and start and get rid of the fees for the university students. Use that a way of providing incomes to regional university towns. All those sorts of factors boost the aggregate demand using the capacity of the state to create money, but not for funding bureaucrats in the heart of London and more Dominic Cummings clones, but get it out to the regions through the councils.
Yeah, but of course the argument always given, isn't it, that if you, because all of that will mean more money, more spending by the public sector. And, the usual argument for that is, well, OK, if you're going to do that, you need to spend the money on creating something solid, some piece of infrastructure, so we can see the money's not being wasted. We don't want it to be frittered away paying higher wages because then we're just spending more money to get what we're already getting. I'm not saying that's my argument, but that is the argument that obviously is used, which is why money always goes into big infrastructure projects, because we like to see something solid coming out of our spending.
I wish some of those people listen to their own ideology, and if they're saying the government shouldn't be picking winners, well, don't. Give the money to other people and let them pick them. And that's that's one of the great advantages of fully funded universities, because you provide students with the cash flow they spend in the local economy, and then students are often the ones who are on the forefront of new forms of demand, new forms of technology. Let them decide it, but provide the money by the state creation of it, and that's. If they listen to their own ideology, they realise by trying to put infrastructure projects like high-speed rail and so on, they're trying to pick the winners. And the UK's track record in winners at the national level has been pretty pathetic.
Yeah. Well, look, I tell you, the one thing that this has determined in the last half hour, Steve, is when I become Prime Minister, when I'm Prime Minister, I'm going to, I'll make you Chancellor of the Exchequer. We'll get it sorted just between the two of us. No problem at all. Problem solved.
No, you can take over question time.
It would be fun, I reckon.
You'd handle it. It'd be more entertaining than the current files, that's for sure.
All right. See you soon. Catch you next time. Thanks,
okay,
Steve.
mate. Bye-bye. Yep.
Well, one question for the Prime Minister is, what do we do about China? The new security law that they've introduced for Hong Kong is having the West spitting chips. So how should countries respond? Is it with trade sanctions? And if so, who pays for that? Because is it really China that's paying for it? If you stop imports from China, which goods are going to replace them? Are we going to pay more for the goods that we have to get from elsewhere? We'll look at our massive over-dependency on China next time on the Debunking Economics podcast with Professor Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie. See you then. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then please share it with your friends, like it on YouTube, and subscribe to this channel.